The soft morning sun was just touching the mountain peaks. In a beautiful valley in North Dakota, USA, the dew-soaked grass sparkled like pearls. A cool breeze stirred the leaves of the trees, and in the distance, dozens of goats grazed peacefully in a wooden pen. 10-year-old Jake stood by the pen with his grandfather. Suddenly, his eyes caught something at the edge of the forest. A beautiful deer stood there. Its large eyes, long legs, and antlers like branches made it look like a character straight out of a fairy tale. Jake said in amazement, "Grandpa, this animal is even more beautiful than a goat. So why do we raise goats and not this?" Grandpa didn't answer right away. He smiled, put his hand on Jake's shoulder, and said, "If I answer you right now, you'll probably only remember one thing. But if you come with me, today you'll learn a secret that has shaped human life for thousands of years." Curiosity lit up Jake's face. The two of them walked into the pen. A white goat ambled slowly toward them. She rested her head against Jake's hand, as if she'd known him for years. At that same moment, the deer at the edge of the forest was still watching them. Jake waved his hand. But the instant the deer noticed the small human movement, it turned and vanished behind the trees within seconds. Jake said in surprise, "That's such a timid animal." Grandpa laughed. "Not timid, wild." "But Grandpa, what if we raised it from when it was little?" Grandpa took a deep breath. "Children have probably been asking their elders this very question for thousands of years." Jake's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Yeah. When humans gave up hunting and started farming, they needed animals that could live alongside them. They looked at sheep, they looked at goats, they looked at cows, they looked at deer too. But in the end, they didn't choose the deer." "Why not?" Grandpa didn't answer right away. He took Jake to another part of the pen where a farmer was milking a goat. A steady stream of milk poured into a steel bucket. "See that?" "Yes. This goat isn't just a blessing for her own kids. She's a blessing for humans too. She gives milk every single day. From that milk comes yogurt, buttermilk, butter, cheese, and the livelihood of millions of families around the world. Thousands of years ago, when there was no electricity, no refrigerators, no machines to preserve milk, and no big farms, an animal's wealth was its livestock, and its life depended on the animals that could live alongside it. Goat hide was used to make water skins. When there was no electricity, no fridge, people kept their water in these. The breeze kept the water cool. If you poured in yogurt and kept turning it, butter would form. That was the secret behind people's cold buttermilk in summer. Goat leather, carefully softened, was also made into flour sacks. People kept their flour in bags like this too, so it wouldn't spoil while traveling." Jake said in amazement, "So a goat doesn't just give milk, even her hide is useful to people." Grandpa smiled. "That's not all. Her manure becomes fertilizer for the field. Her kids grow up quickly, and the herd keeps growing bit by bit. That's why the goat has been a source of livelihood for farmers for centuries," he said slowly. "Now I'm starting to understand. Keeping a deer might be a hobby, but keeping a goat is a way of making a living." Grandpa ran his hand over Jake's head and said, "Exactly, son. Beauty doesn't always become a livelihood, and not every free animal can be happy in captivity. Humans didn't adopt the goat because she was the most beautiful. They adopted her because she learned to live alongside humans." Jake asked right away, "So doesn't a deer give milk?" Grandpa smiled and said, "It does, but not enough for a family or a farm to easily live on." Jake fell silent. Now a new question had formed in his mind. If it gives so little milk, why not raise it for meat instead? Grandpa had been waiting for this exact question. He said, "This is exactly where most people go wrong." The two of them walked toward the forest. A few minutes later, they spotted a whole herd of deer. Grandpa said quietly, "Now just take one step forward." The moment Jake took a step, the entire herd vanished into the forest in an instant, moving at incredible speed. Just a few seconds, and the whole field was empty. Jake was stunned. "They disappeared like the wind," Grandpa said. "That's their real strength." Then he paused and said, "Think about it. If you had 100 goats, they'd all come back to the pen on their own by evening. But if you had 100 deer, would they come back?" Jake shook his head. "Probably not." "Not probably not. Almost never." There was silence for a few moments. Then Grandpa said, "If you had lived 10,000 years ago, which of these two animals would you have chosen for your farm?" Jake said with a smile, "I'd choose the deer." Grandpa smiled too. "Almost every kid gives that same answer." Then he said softly, "But once you hear the whole story, maybe your answer will change." At that very moment, one of the goats in the pen gave birth to two tiny kids. Jake ran over to them, delighted. Grandpa said, "See that? 2 babies in one go. Sometimes even 3. Jake asked immediately, "And deer?" Grandpa looked up at the sky and said, "That is exactly the question that's going to turn this whole story around." Jake was still watching the tiny goat kids in wonder. He asked quietly, "Grandpa, you said this question would change the whole story. Why does a deer only give birth to one baby?" Grandpa looked at the little kid, then said with a smile, "Nature doesn't make every animal the same, son. Every animal has its own wisdom." The two of them started walking toward the forest. Along the way, they sat on a wooden bench, and Grandpa picked up a stick and drew 2 pictures in the dirt. On one side, a goat. On the other, a deer. "Now imagine," Grandpa said, "you're a farmer. You only have enough money to buy 10 animals. Would you choose an animal whose family grows quickly, or one that grows very slowly over many years?" Jake answered right away, "Obviously the one that grows quickly." "Exactly," Grandpa said. "A goat often has 2 kids at a time. time, sometimes even 3. In just a few years, a small herd becomes a large one, but a female deer usually gives birth to only one fawn. If that fawn falls prey to a predator or doesn't survive, the whole year is lost, Jake said in surprise. So the farmer would have to wait a long time. Exactly. And a farmer can't run a household on waiting alone. At that moment, a loud sound came from the forest. 2 large male deer were clashing antlers. Crack, crack, crack. The sound was so loud that birds flew up in alarm. Jake got nervous. Why are they fighting? Grandpa said. It's mating season. During this time, male deer fight each other over territory and females. Do goats do that too? Sometimes there's a bit of light sparring, but most breeds have grown used to living alongside humans. Male deer, on the other hand, can become so powerful and aggressive during this season that they even become a danger to humans. Jake fell silent. Now he was starting to understand that the problem wasn't just about beauty, it was also about temperament. Grandpa asked another question. If you had 100 goats, 1 or a few billy goats would be enough for them. They can stay on the farm year-round. But imagine, if you were raising deer, how hard would it be to manage powerful stags every mating season? Jake nodded. That does sound really hard. Grandpa smiled. Now hear another secret. They walked over to a small dairy area where goat milk was being cooled. This milk comes in every day. This is what makes up the farmer's daily income. Jake asked. And deer? Deer milk exists, but it isn't practical for ordinary farm. It's not easy to milk them regularly. The quantity is small, and deer aren't nearly as used to humans as goats are. Jake took a deep breath. So the farmer would lose money every day, Grandpa answered. If he tried to raise only deer, then yes, in most cases. A few steps ahead, a tourist was watching the deer in the forest through binoculars. Grandpa pointed toward him. Look, people come from all over the world just to see deer, because a deer's true beauty lies in its freedom. If you locked it up in a pen all the time like a goat, it wouldn't be the same animal that people are amazed to see in the wild. Jake stayed quiet for a long while. Then he said softly, Grandpa, now I think I understand. Humans didn't change the goat chose to live with humans. A smile spread across Grandpa's face. Well done! You've come very close to the real secret. Then, looking up at the sky, he said, but there's still one question left. If the deer is such a difficult animal, then why do some countries in the world still have deer farms? And what do they get out of it that ordinary farmers can't? Curiosity sparked again in Jake's eyes. Grandpa, I definitely want to know that, Grandpa said.
Grandpa and Jake walked slowly into the forest. The sun was now peeking through the branches of the trees, and in a distant open field, a small herd of deer grazed peacefully. Jake asked in a quiet voice, Grandpa, you said some countries around the world have deer farms too. If that's true, then why doesn't everyone raise deer? Grandpa smiled. That's the last secret, and once you learn it, you'll be able to answer that question yourself. He stopped in front of a wooden board with pictures of different animals painted on it. Grandpa said, Son, humans didn't domesticate every animal. They only adopted the ones that were suited to living alongside them. The goat lives with humans, gives milk, gives meat. Her kind reproduces relatively quickly. She's easy to manage, and she learns to trust humans quickly. The deer is beautiful, fat, intelligent, but its real strength is its freedom. At that very moment, a deer lifted its head, looked at the two of them for a moment, and then the whole herd silently vanished into the depths of the forest. Grandpa said softly, See that? That's its true nature. Jake asked, Then why do those farms exist? Grandpa answered, Some countries, like New Zealand and a few parts of Europe, do have deer farms. There, deer are raised for specific purposes, like meat or certain product. But these farms aren't like ordinary goat or cattle farms. They need very strong fencing, more space, special care, and much higher costs. That's why most farmers around the world still prefer goats, sheep, or cattle. Jake was smiling now. So the problem isn't that the deer isn't a useful animal. It's that it wasn't made for domestic life, Grandpa said happily. Exactly. You just summed up the whole story in one sentence. The two of them fell silent for a while. The wind rustled through the leaves, birds chirped, and in the distance, the same goats grazed peacefully. Grandpa said, looking up at the sky, nature gave every animal its own role. The goat became suited to living with humans, while the deer became a symbol of the forest's freedom. If we tried to lock up every beautiful animal in our pen, the world might just lose its beauty. Jake looked toward the forest one last time. He had his answer now. He said with a smile, Grandpa, now if anyone ever asks me why we raise goats and not deer, I won't just say the deer runs away. I'll tell them the whole story. Grandpa laughed. And that will be the best answer of all. On one side, goats grazing peacefully in a green field. On the other, deer running free through the forest. And in the background, a voice echoed. Every animal has its own world. Humans gave the goat a place in their home, but the deer always chose the forest as its home. Perhaps that is where nature's greatest wisdom lies. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because in our next video, we'll bring you another question whose answer you may never have heard before. Like the video, be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments and hit the bell icon so our next interesting video reaches you first.